everybody, this is Hua. Welcome back to the Domineering CEO. This is Chapter 3. I hope that you have been enjoying the story of Rylee, Theseus, and Erick. Sit back, relax, and enjoy.
We were crazy in love, careless and young, but I wouldn't change it. You had me right from the start, you gave me your all, but something changed, yeah. And I sometimes drive you crazy, but I need you. Yeah, I sometimes drive you crazy. And I think that's why you've been building up this wall now, and I don't really know how I'm supposed to break it down. I tried peeking through the cracks, saw the light but couldn't catch it.
Are you alright? Rylee asked as she entered the living room, where she found Brinley sitting and reading a magazine. The woman stood and took her hands, checking the bandage and then making a sad face. Oh dear, I am so sorry I hurt you. Don't be sorry. You were unwell, and I'm just glad that we caught each other, that you didn't fall to the ground. Sit down. They sat down, and Rylee smiled at her warmly. How are you doing? I'm all right. I had an episode last night, and I'm still recovering. I told Theseus that he could go and you would be here soon, but he refused, and so did Kingston. Well, I'm glad he's still here nonetheless. I'm grateful for him for getting the doctor to come to me. Brinley smiled, and then she tapped her hand. I had a plan for us too, but with everything that happened, let us spend the day inside, and I'll have Theseus order in some food. And then later tonight, how about a board game? Sounds great. Around noon, Brinley went to take a nap, and Rylee ventured out to the backyard to enjoy the fresh air. This place really was a gem, so full of life with nature, and it was private. All her life she'd grown up around loudness, and she wasn't used to this. She remembered waking up to hear the tractor or the trucks zooming by. It was a loudness that reminded her she was alive and well, hearing the world. But here, it was quiet, and a calm that fed her soul kindness and peace. You found my favorite spot. She turned around as Theseus came to join her with a cup of coffee. Thank you. She took it as he joined her. I didn't mean to steal your place. No, it's a beautiful thinking spot. I can't begin to tell you how many ideas were born here, in this place. Laughing, she replied, Oh, I'm honored to be sitting here then. Are you still in pain? He asked, pointing to her hand. She looked at it and shook her head. No, it's better now. I'm sure that it would act up again, but the doctor's medicine that he gave me will help calm the pain down. Thanks again for your help. Smiling, he replied, I'm a pro at this. Saving young helpless women? And then suddenly Rylee realized she sounded like she was flirting. It made it worse when he asked her, Are you flirting with me? She coughed and stood as she gathered what was left of her courage and thanked him for the coffee and left. She was cute. She really was. The kind of cute that had him wondering how she'd look beneath him. The kind of cute just didn't come along every day. He promised his grandmother he wouldn't pursue her, and he would do as he said. But what if she pursued him? It would be rude to not return the gesture. He hadn't had a woman since Della and him split up. As he made his way to the kitchen, he could hear soft laughter and chattering. He recognized his grandmother's laugh, and his heart felt comforted. It was good knowing she could make his grandmother happy. His phone buzzed, and he took it out, seeing that Jennifer was calling him. Yes, Jennifer? Sir? She sounded distraught. I'm so sorry to call you at home. He straightened and hurried back into his room for privacy. What's wrong? Della is back here, and she's trashing everything unless I call you in. I know you told me to call the police, but she threatened to kill herself if I did. I don't know what to do. He sighed and slipped his feet into his shoes. I'll be right there. He hung up and hurried out, where he ran into Rylee, who was rounding the corner. She shrieked and put up her hands to protect herself and broke the new stitches on her hand. Blood began oozing out, and she let out a painful sob. "What happened?" Grandmother asked as she came in. Her cheeks paled when she saw Rylee's bloody hand. "Oh no, dear, are you all right?" He took her hand and examined it. Sure enough, the stitches had come undone. "I'm so sorry, Rylee. Come with me. I'll take you to the hospital. The doctor is not reachable at this hour." "It's okay." "No, it's not okay." He took her elbow and ushered her out as his grandmother bid them goodbye. When they got outside, he instructed Stan to stay with his grandmother as he opened the passenger car for her to get in. He glanced at her hands and noticed that the bleeding had become lighter. "I have to go somewhere real quick, and then I'll take you to the hospital. Bear with me." "Where are we going?" she asked. "To my office." The drive there was faster than he ever drove, and he could tell Rylee was afraid of his speed. But if Della was making hell, he needed to stop her. Once he parked the car, he turned to her. "Wait for me here. I'll be right back." He got out before she could agree and hurried inside. Sure enough, there were junk all over the reception area, and his office door was wide open, and he could see one of his plants had been tipped over. Jennifer came to him. Her cheeks were flushed, and she looked like she needed a drink. "Sir, I'm so sorry." He raised his hand. "I'll handle this. You go home. In fact, get everyone out." "Yes, sir." He walked into the office, and she sat there cross-legged with her eyes glaring at him. She had ripped her nail bed, and a few were bleeding. She was breathing as if she were a bull ready to charge. His office was a mess, pictures turned over and plants on the ground. Dirt was everywhere, and there was even a crack in the window. "Della, I thought I warned you to stay away from here." She stood up, and he noticed that she was shaking. "You bastard. I thought you were just tired of me, but it seems you have a new piece of ass. That's why you had no problem ditching me." "What?" he asked, confused, as he tried to maintain the situation. "What are you talking about?" She rolled her eyes. "Always playing the innocent man. Always. I drove by your house this morning. I saw you with her." Theseus thought long and hard, and then suddenly it hit him. Did she happen to drive by when Rylee had been in his arms? Was that the explanation for this? He wanted to laugh. One little misunderstanding, and this is her payback to him. "What does it matter? We're not together anymore, Della. What you did here today, I can sue you." "Then sue me," she cried as she threw up her hands. "I will never let you go. I will stalk you until the end of time. Who is she?" And Rylee took that single moment to walk in, calling out his name. "Theseus, is everything okay? I saw people rushing out like there was a fire in here," she asked as she walked in. The moment her eyes fell on Della and the mess the office was in, she stepped back and Della's eyes widened. "Oh my God, you brought her with you," Della cried. Rylee opened her mouth in shock and turned to him. I would just go back to wait in the car." And Della lunged forward, reaching for her. Rylee shrieked, and Theseus came forward, blocking her from hitting Rylee. He felt her nails scratch his neck, and then felt something hit his shoulder. Pain escalated through his body, and he turned around to find her shoe in her hand. The heck? Did the crazy woman just hit him with her damn heel? Della screamed and came at him again, but this time he took both her hands and shoved her down to the ground. "Rylee, call the cops." Rylee turned and hurried to the front desk where she picked up the phone. He turned back to Della, who was sobbing on the ground, and knelt down. He couldn't believe the state of mind she was in. "You need help. Professional help. You're not safe to be around anyone. I'm going to do you a favor because I owe you that much. If you ever come near my home or office again, I'll make sure you get locked up for good." Della got up and surprised him when she tore at her clothes, screaming at the top of her lungs. He stood and backed up, fear settling into his heart as he knew her intention. Right then, Rylee came in and she shoved Theseus out the door. When Della saw this, she came at her half naked with her arms over her head. "Rylee!" Theseus cried as Della began choking her. The sound of the sirens outside alerted him, and he ran to the front door, opening it as the cops came in and managed to pull Della off Rylee. One of the male officers blocked him from entering as two more entered his office. Della's voice was loud and threatening as she cried out how she would kill Rylee. Two officers were able to flip her over and handcuffed her as they threw a blanket over her. As they dragged her out, she was still spitting and cursing at everything. "Rylee!" he cried as the officer finally let him go. He ran in to find Rylee sitting on the ground, her hair a mess, and her stitches now had fully opened, blood oozing everywhere. Scratches of nails were on her cheeks and neck as he bent down and took her arms. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, guilt settling into his heart. "I'm so sorry." "Who the hell was that?" she asked through a bruised lip. He ran his thumb over her chin and let out a shaky breath. "She's my ex-girlfriend, and she thought you and I were dating." Laughing, Rylee shook her head. "You sure know how to pick them." "Sir, she needs medical attention. We will need to take her to the hospital, and we also need to take your statement," an officer on scene said. "I'll drive her to the hospital, and then after we'll drop by the station to give her statement," Theseus said. "Sure. Just give the clerk at the front desk this case number." He handed a card to him. "We'll take the lady in and book her for the night. If there's nothing else, we'll be leaving now." "Thank you," Theseus said as he helped her stand up. He turned to Rylee and gave her a weak smile. "Let's get you cleaned up." Erick closed his truck door and began walking to the hospital entrance with the appointment letter for his interview. His heart was pounding as he neared the front door, wondering if they would take him, as he wasn't sure anyone would invite someone like him to work, since he'd had little experience. As he neared the front entrance, Rylee and Theseus came out and her hand was bandaged. When he saw the state she was in, the appointment disappeared from his mind, and he rushed over, calling her name. She turned toward him, and he took her arm, looking her over. "What happened to you?" he asked. And then he looked at Theseus. "What did you do to her?" "Stop," Rylee said as she shrugged her hands from his hold. "It's not his fault. I'm fine." "Fine? Your damn lip is busted, Rylee. If your parents see you in this state, they'll freak out." "I take full responsibility for her," Theseus said. "You just stay away from her. One day working for you, and she looks like she's been hit by a goddamn bus." "Erick!" she cried. "Stop. You don't know what happened, okay? I'm fine." And then she frowned. "What are you doing here?" He shook his head. "Nothing. I'm going to take you home." "No," she cried. "I can't go back home. I have to stay with Mrs. Brindley. It's my job." "The hell with that. And does being beat up come with it?" Theseus stepped forward. "You don't know what you're talking about, Erick. I know what I see." "Erick!" Rylee cried, losing patience. "Stop it. What you see and what you know are two different things. Go about your day and leave me alone, okay? You don't know what happened. And for your information, it wasn't done by Theseus. Just let it go." He couldn't believe what he was hearing. She sounded like a completely different woman, someone he didn't know. He felt the hurt hit him like a slap in the face. He shook his head and then wanted to laugh. "You're right. Why do I care so much?" he asked as he turned and walked back to the truck, forgetting altogether the reason why he was there in the first place. He could hear her calling for him, but he ignored it as he got into his car. He watched as she shook her head in disbelief and walked away with Theseus to a very expensive vehicle. Did money really change her that much? Erick spent the afternoon drowning in whiskey as he laid in his hammock in the backyard, watching the sun go down. Hours later, he was still pissed off about Rylee and what had happened between them. This was around the time where she would come and spend it with him, lying together and watching the sunset. But here he was. Sunset, hammock, and no Rylee. He wanted to laugh at how pitiful he was, and then he realized he really was pitiful. Drowning in whiskey wouldn't help, and he would end up with a headache in the morning. He dropped the bottle down and heard something behind him. When he turned around, he saw Cameron Lee, friend of both his and Rylee, walking toward them. She had been gone for a week on a trip to Colorado to visit family. He hadn't realized it had been that long already. Cameron was the bubbly type with a loud voice and even louder laughter, but she had been there with him and Rylee from the beginning, but she moved to another county after high school. "What are you brooding over?" Cameron asked as she neared him, carrying a chair in her hand to place beside him. Her black shoulder-length hair had some blonde highlights that sparkled in the setting sun's light. "Nothing you need to know about," he whispered. "Whatever, Eric. I see that damn whiskey bottle. You never take it out unless you're hurting real bad." He rolled his eyes. "How is Colorado?" "Changing the subject. Another dead giveaway you're hurting bad." He flipped out from the hammock and gave her an angry glare. "Are you here to rain on my parade, knowing me better than I know myself, huh?" Laughing, Cameron replied, Did I strike a chord? Eric, what's wrong?" He shoved his hands through his hair and wanted to tug each strand from his scalp. Frustrating. "You woman." "Oh, it's a woman problem. I'm a genius. I'll help you solve it. Tell me more." Shaking his head, he replied, "Nothing to concern you with." Then he shoved his hands in his jeans. "How is your family in Colorado?" Cameron smiled. "They're as good as always. Where's Rylee?" Her mother said she wasn't home. He made a face. "Huh. She's too busy these days to be hanging around with me." "Well, you have me. I'll be your date." Eric shook his head. "You're not my type." As he said this, he thought he saw a glimmer of hurt across her gaze, but it disappeared so quickly he wasn't sure if he ever did see it. "That's better. I won't ask for a second date." He rubbed his face. I'm sorry, Cameron. I'm being a jerk." "Yeah, you are. Now take me to dinner and I'll forgive you." The house was too big for Rylee, and she could hear all these creaking sounds at night. It wasn't home, and she felt unsafe as she listened to the different notes being played in the dark. A little after 10 tonight, it began to rain, and it was still pouring outside. She could hear the rain clattering on the roof and against the windows. Lightning flashed and thunder roared as she yelped and pulled the blanket over her head. She hated nights like these. When it was like this, Eric was with her, holding her in his arms, and she felt safe. Eric. She felt so bad about what had happened. She just couldn't tell him about Theseus's ex-girlfriend in front of him like that. It felt wrong, and it wasn't even her story to tell. She would apologize to Eric in the right time. Thunder roared again as she yelped a second time. This was when she heard the soft knock on her door, and Theseus' voice called out her name. "Yes?" she asked. "Can I come in?" She gave him permission, and he opened the door. The hallway light spilled in, and he stepped in wearing a set of blue pajamas. "Are you all right?" "Did I wake you?" Rylee asked. "My office is down the hall, and I could hear you." "I'm so sorry," she said, almost near tears. I'm scared of thunder." His face softened as he walked in further. "What would you like me to do?" "I hate to be of inconvenience to you." "Nonsense. What can I do?" "Stay with me? Just sit in here with me?" He nodded, and he turned to close the door as he brought the chair in the corner to sit down. She reached over and turned on the lamp, and a soft glow filled the room. Her eyes were tearing up, and he noticed as he reached for the tissues on the stand and handed it to her. She took them and dabbed at her eyes, embarrassed. "Sorry," she muttered. "Don't be. I hate the thunder. Eric used to hold me during nights like these." Theseus' face almost paled in color. "Are you and Eric together?" Shaking her head, she replied, "No, he's my best friend and neighbor. We're not romantically involved." I second-guessed that, seeing how he reacted this afternoon. "He protects me is all. I'm like his sister." I have female cousins, but I don't protect them like that." Rylee raised her eyebrows. "What does that mean?" "You don't know," he asked as she shook her head. "He is clearly in love with you." Rylee laughed and sat up in bed, adjusting herself to a more comfortable position. "He's not in love with me." Theseus leaned forward on his knees. "Want to bet?" Intrigued, she swung her legs down and smiled. "What's the conditions?" "If I'm right, you go on a date with me. And if I'm wrong, I'll give you a bonus." She raised an eyebrow and a smirk appeared. "How much of a bonus?" "One enough to make you agree to this bet." Thunder roared and she yelped, jumping up, and he reached out to pull her into his lap. She huddled in his arms. Thunder roared again, and he put his arms around her. The protection circle he built veiled her in as she let go her fear. "Do you agree?" he whispered against her ear. Without looking up, she replied, "Yes, I do." Thank you for tuning in. Chapter 4 will be out shortly.
We were crazy in love, careless and young, but I wouldn't change it. You had me right from the start, you gave me your all, but something changed, yeah. And I sometimes drive you crazy. But I need you. Yeah, I know, I sometimes drive you crazy. And I think that's why you've been building up this wall now. And I don't really know how I'm supposed to break it down. I tried peeking through the cracks, saw the light but couldn't